Thanks very much for joining in. This panel's topic is about investing and VCs, the good old fun. And it's no surprise here today that at least the crypto market, it's a little bit of a lull right now. So what do you, I'm gonna ask you guys, what are you guys excited about? But before that, I think you guys should introduce yourself. I kind of forgot about that step. So.
Okay, I'll start, I guess.
Yes.
So my name is Bram, I'm from Maven 11. We're an Amsterdam-based venture capital fund focused on blockchain. We invest in infrastructure, in DeFi, and everything a bit to do with Web3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my name's Xaviar. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Chorus One. We're an institutional staking provider based out of Switzerland, and running nodes on Saga and also invested in Saga.
Hi, I'm Tess, founder of Tess Venture. We're a VC fund based out of Silicon Valley. Super excited because so many of my portfolio companies here, Saga, Rebecca, Jin. Obviously, I invested in Animoca, so obviously it's great to see Sandbox here, and Shrapnel, and amongst many more. So we've been investing over the last 15 years, Web 2 and Web 3. We have over 100 portfolios in Web 3, 100 portfolios in Web 2. We invest at all stages, mainly early stage, and geography-wise, we invest globally. The team's very hands-on. We try to be boots on the ground, helping all founders expand. So very excited to be here.
Wonderful. So what are you guys excited about these days? What gives you hope about the market?
Oh, wow. No, there's a lot to be hopeful about. I think the demise of crypto has been overstated. I think there's a lot of things that are still getting a lot of traction. I think not only from within the market, I think, or within people that are really in crypto since very early on. I think there are still some new entrants. I think gaming, for example, and now we're here at the gaming conference as well with Gamescom, is one of those areas. I think that can be interesting. We see now, I think Parallel has launched last week. There's a lot of inflow there, a lot of excitement. I think that is an example. I think, as also was said in the previous panels, there is so many economic designs that can be super interesting that weren't possible before. Mm-hmm. Blockchain technology that are now getting introduced, not just, again, in our financial markets, but also other markets. I think that can be interesting. And there's still a lot of growth. And this morning we were with my colleagues at Gamescom as well, and there's not a lot of mention yet of metaverse or blockchain and so on, which means there's still so much more room to grow as well. So it's not just all doom and gloom. I think that also shows that even though it's still small, a lot of these companies like Saga, but others that we've seen today, are building towards that more broader adoption.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm excited about is pretty niche, but probably relevant to gaming at the moment. So very excited about personal servers, personal state, identity, some of these types of topics. And I think some of them are quite relevant for gaming. Mm-hmm. I've had quite a lot of conversations here the last few days on speaking with gaming publishers or developers or investors about gaming itself and where it's at. And I think something I've taken away so far is a lot of it is about assets in gaming. And then I sort of question whether or not the gaming, or gamers I should say, actually care enough about assets yet for gaming to go large. But I guess my question now is what would someone actually really care about? And probably you care more about your own compute. And I guess the problem right now in gaming with Web 2.5 games at times, from what I understand, is you might have an NFT, but then if it's Web 2.5, there might be a centralized server somewhere which sort of dictates what the value of that NFT is. So even if it might be on chain, it can still censor you in some way. Mm-hmm. And I think decentralization for gaming companies right now isn't necessarily at the forefront of their thinking. So I think we need to, as an industry, need to think for gaming itself, what are the problems in Web 2 games and how can we solve that? And is it ownership? Is it just ownership of NFTs and currencies, or is it ownership of their own compute and their own identity and using that across games? And that's what I'm pretty excited about right now.
For me at Tess Venture, despite the market being, on a, kind of bear market, we've invested across many cycles. We're founders investing in founders. I started my companies early, so we understand that this is just the ebbs and flow of the market. So we've been, still very actively investing, very busy because companies, as you mentioned, Parallel NFT Life. We also invested into that. Everything takes a while to build great projects, great vision, great team. So we think that the market, emerging markets are very interesting. So yeah, founders that can build product and bring value add to global scale. At the end of the day, it's going to give you that advantage. Of course, focus locally as well, because you can't be building for everything. But that's the beauty of blockchain. It's able to capture the hearts and minds of people globally, no matter what culture. So at Tess Venture, we've been helping our teams expand across to Southeast Asia, to Latin America, and the last year the initiative has been to Middle East, where gaming is huge. And I've been myself and my team spending a lot of time in whether it's UAE, Dubai, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's Qatar. I think it's important to always be dynamic and be at the forefront. As investors who invest in frontier technology, we've been investing in AI over the last 10 years. The firm obviously is based in Silicon Valley for a specific reason. So much of the talent comes from Berkeley, Stanford, or across the States. And globally, everyone's attracted to Silicon Valley. So that's where we have headquartered, but we have offices and teams globally. So we try our best to help teams, regardless of where they are and at what stage. So I think we're still very bullish because, the market will be picking up. What goes up comes down. What goes down goes up. So we just got to be patient and find those strategic investors, advisors that can help you guide through and not be giving you a hard time in those downturns. It's like working together is the most important thing.
Wonderful. So let's bring it back now into gaming because so as investors, what is your thesis around the game and the gaming ecosystem?
It's a very broad question, I would say. I think
questions are good.
Exactly. And then we can fill it in ourselves, right? So I would say our thesis is still a bit unrefined, which is normal in such a nascent industry, and we see a lot of people try a lot of different things. I think what we really like to see is, and this has been said over and over again, but we would like to see why should this game have a Web3 component, right? That for us is important. So that doesn't just mean indeed trading assets around, like you said, basically. There should be something where the player actually has a benefit that extends beyond that. So we see a lot of different things there. Some players are attracted to play to earn, which we saw I think last year a lot of. That for us is a bit like mercenary, because as soon as the next more higher yielding game comes along, they will move to that. We see things where, what for example for me is something interesting, is where you could, for example, buy with assets from one game, assets in the other game. I think that currency aspect and that interoperability is quite interesting. We also like to see a bit the more modular approach, where also on the infrastructure side, you have a lot of things working together. Not just on one specific chain, but chain agnostic, like across multiple chains in a very fluent manner. I think that's a bit our thesis as well, where we see the more things going that way. I as a gamer don't care if I'm on Avalanche or on Solana. I would like to just have a game that works and where I don't have to wait 12 seconds for my block to finish before I have my items in my loot bag, for example. So for us, it's mostly seeing that added value of blockchain in games, in infra, and also seeing how this goes together with the more broad ecosystem that we're building here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be quite difficult to have a gaming thesis because it's so nascent right now. There are some niche things I would say that I am quite interested in gaming at the moment. One of them isn't so niche, it's like fully on-chain games. So if anyone's interested, we published some research on this a few months ago on how to build a fully on-chain game using Avalanche. One unique thing about Avalanche is that you can have many different VMs running at once, which you can't really get on other blockchains. So I think that's quite a good platform to build a fully on-chain game. Outside of that, I'm actually quite excited about very basic games, which sort of record certain actions that you take within the game. So we've had play to earn before, but I'm quite interested in play to access. So I think Web3 is actually beyond blockchain, and right now we're very focused on the blockchain phase, but I really am interested in the layer below blockchain, just like peer-to-peer operating system type networks. And I think it would be really cool when you could get both Web2 and Web3 people playing really basic games if it meant they could access something that was integrated in the game itself. So I'm not playing for a currency or an NFT in the game. I'm playing for access to a founder, which I can't get elsewhere, and that founder might be partnered with this game because maybe it's on the blockchain or something like that. And that means a lot to me. And I'm willing to play the game to access something. I'm not necessarily just playing the game for the game itself. I think ideas like this can be very unique and should be explored more. And I think right now, the market is rewarding very straightforward ideas for games, which I can't always see the argument for why that game should be more valuable in Web3 than Web2. I would like to see the infrastructure being used in more unique ways than how it is right now. And that's what I try and look for, I'd say.
Interesting.
What excites us at Test Venture is I think the gaming ecosystem in its whole is at the cusp of more adoption because blockchain itself is at the cusp of having more mass adoption coming in, and gaming obviously is that gateway. So we've been investing heavily in this ecosystem. I think it boils down to three things. It's about obviously the team, the other investors, and the ecosystem. So what we've tried to do is support founders that have a gaming vision, because no one really understands, especially in blockchain, where the adoption will be, which country, which region. So I think fundamentally in terms of the team, we look to invest in Avenger teams where they have complementary. Hopefully the team has amazing track record and also experience in Web2 gaming. And of course, they must have the team members that are very crypto native in Web3, and then ideally that team itself, if they don't have it, investors coming in can help them build out that team that helps support them from the investor side to advisory. So for us, I think the ecosystem, if you can find teams and help them transition an ecosystem where they're supported with infrastructure that if the team exists don't have, then you can help guide them towards that. And I think just helping them understand just how the Web3 market really is, and in these bull markets, tell them to really take that chance to secure treasury funding so that you can get ready for the downturn. So I think there's so many facets of it, but fundamentally, obviously, the game needs to be fun, and that's not easy to do because the market's continually changing. There's other competitors, and you don't know where the further funding is to continue sustaining that game in the team. Because if a game is successful, the team keeps expanding and keep growing. So what do you do at later rounds? I think that's where Web2 investors also can help guide, because Web3 is where we're all investing in, but you also need the experience of people on the team and investors that can help you with this. So there's our fundamental approach to how we think about gaming and what we'll invest in and what type of teams that we hope to find and help form.
Cool. So I'm gonna start going off script a little bit and start asking you guys, because you guys are more like Web3 native investors to begin with. Mm-hmm. And when game companies come to you, how do you even begin analyzing this? Because usually, as of traditionally, a game's life cycle is significantly longer than most like Web3 project. Generally, a good game it takes a long time to make. Whereas in Web3, things happen a little bit more faster because you can start releasing things in smaller chunks, right? Mm-hmm. So then, how do you go about thinking about the risk rewards and the dynamics of this, especially when it becomes the cross section of Web3 and gaming? Then,
yeah, I think the timeline needs to be adjusted a little bit towards the industry that you're catering to, of course. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of the Web3 games focus also on crypto native users. So they are generally more fine with a beta version of a game, mm-hmm. Because as you can also see with most of the applications today, they're also all still beta, right? And they're still getting released updates every now and then. I think that's fine, and I think also there we don't usually invest in games that indeed have like these 5-year development horizon, and only then they will launch. Mm-hmm. And they're maybe building on infrastructure that is probably already very much outdated by the time that it goes live. So right. Also there is some risk. So for us, it's mostly seeing are they thinking in the right way, of course, with the infrastructure that they're using, as well as also with their go-to-market, with their approach there. in a way that they can maybe release something already to generate excitement towards their community base, build a bit of a community. I think the strength between Web3 and gaming is also that why we also don't see really much AAA games, in my opinion, is that these AAA games, indeed, they can do this. They can last 5 years, but as an indie developer, if I'm strapped for cash, I cannot do this. So they typically release these small versions, these storylines of games. And by doing this, by integrating this with Web3, you could actually build a community around that and also fundraise, because typically these types of games are cash strapped. So by using that, I think they can use that for fundraising for their projects, continuously also get immediate feedback for the community. And that's something that we're looking for. I don't think that we are suited also in our mandate, for example, to invest in the bigger AAA gaming studios. We are looking for these smaller niche ones that can deliver and also build a bit of community around them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree with all of your points. I think what's quite interesting from a funding standpoint is you have these bigger studios right now. It's sort of unproven in Web3 gaming, especially if the secret to success is going to be like a smaller indie studio, if it's going to be like throwing a lot of money at it with a lot of reputation and already very good at building Web2 games. I think it's way too early to say right now what's going to be the winner. If you were an investor purely focused on gaming, which Chorus One isn't, like probably a good strategy would be to diversify your portfolio, and you'd go for the big game studios as well as the smaller ones. I think right now the smaller ones, yes, you get funding easier, which is great, and more VCs are looking at you. But then right now it's really unclear for who is your user then? If you're a niche studio, is it a Web3 user? Is it like a Web2 user? How are you onboarding them? Do you have node operators in your network or not? Are you an app chain? Are you an app? It's like really complicated, I think, for very small teams. And I've spoken with quite a few of these gaming teams. You know, one was building on some blockchain and he's now moving to another blockchain, and then there's another blockchain, and then that blockchain's throwing funding at you.
Yeah.
So I think it's super confusing. And like, if anything, I would think like if you just strip it back down to the basics right now of like just trying to do it as sort of simply as possible, and building a game and testing it on users and iterating. One thing I think that Web 2 is not used to versus Web 3 is like pushing a product out before it's ready. I've seen many teams coming from Web 2 that wait too long, and in Web 3, first to market and speed is everything. So there is a mindset change and difference between Web 2 and Web 3. And overall, I think what you're seeing is like really hard to tell if Web 2, you can actually bring that into Web 3 and be successful. You could, but right now it hasn't been seen, and still get juries out on which strategy or approach would be better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tess, you come from an investor background that's a little bit more diverse than just Web3. So what have you been, I know you've talked to funds like Animoca and other kinds of funds. So how do you think about this kind of things, the differences between the trade-offs, the risks, and things like that?
Right. I mean, that's a great question, and I agree with the other panelists here. If we're solely thinking about blockchain, it is a frontier tech that there's no proven experience in history of how it should be approached. So I think fundamentally, as a founder, as a team who is building something in this space, it's important to really just think about where the funding is round after round, and also, will you have a path that you can have liquidity quick? Because it really doesn't matter at the start, how big the vision, how great the vision is, or who that early investor is. What are they going to do in downturns, right? So I think you really need to, if you believe in what you're doing, yes, funding is funding, and you need that to survive. But when you hit some kind of success, it's at that point, that signal, you need to figure out who are the other investors that you can bring in that's going to guide you through these downturns. And that's crucial. I mean, I have to emphasize that is we are seeing this now. When the wave of, blockchain is at its peak, when crypto, everyone is in, all investors, and we call sometimes these are tourist VCs, tourist investors. And yes, there's funding everywhere. But I mean, take a step back and think, are those the investors that's really going to be able to help you, grow and expand? And that's why earlier I mentioned you have to have, as investor standpoint, we want founding teams and core teams that have the dynamics of those who have experience, Web3, and also, investors. Investors don't have to be brand name. I know everyone's going to be trying to go after, the top 10 brand names in the industry, but it's just investors that are able to help you hands-on guide you and be there to support you and help you think through the next 3 steps. And oftentimes those next 3 steps, founders are not going to want to hear that, because when the investor's telling you this, the market is like thriving and there's like so much money and so much opportunity throwing at you. But that's the time actually when you need to think, what goes up will come down. And that's when you capture as much as you can in terms of funding and in terms of the right talent in your team and lock them in before they go away during downturns. So I can't emphasize that enough, and that's why I'm just super excited here to see Saga and Jin and Rebecca and the rest of the team be able to thrive through downturns and be there at the crucial times. And they're multi-chain, multiverse, so they're supporting the ecosystem. So that's why I think for us at Tess Venture, we invest in cross-pollination. We ideally pick teams and companies and visions and technology that can support the portfolio even. And I think that's crucial. And we look to introduce our awesome teams to other co-investors that have similar kind of vision, but also they may have something that we don't have. So we want to help bring in that complementary. And that's why it's amazing to also, hear the perspective of the other panelists here. And, hopefully we can all synergize.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I remembered what I was going to talk about, which was, you mentioned that Web3 is very familiar with launching something that's not quite ready and learning from that and iterating, and this kind of iterative design. And I think actually the game industry has started doing this, right? So early access is something that is much more prevalent now. Back in the day, people would always launch games when they're ready. But nowadays, I think there's pluses and minuses to these early access game titles, essentially. It has the same problems as crypto, where there might be people who have games that just never finish. There might be games who start with early access, but at least you'll get that signal from the beginning whether or not there's potential in the game and whether the community is interested. And so do you see that as a point in which investors the two sides of the investing can kind of come together? Do you think that model is now will be more complementary, where investing in games will start becoming more and more smaller chunks, as you mentioned, or do you not see this kind of happening in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, for example, there's a AAA game launching in 2 weeks, where if you had bought the $100 package, you could already play it this week. I think that sort of gatekeeping behavior is a bit bad, in my opinion. I think the type of fundraising that you should do instead of pre-ordering is indeed releasing maybe an alpha to supporters of your game that actually buy maybe an NFT, which you might say is the same thing or whatever, but at least there it's your community that then also can maybe get benefits of when the game does well later on. I think these types of designs could be quite interesting. I do think why the traditional game studios are doing this is just to basically get cash flow earlier. They don't really are strapped for cash, and they just see this as like impatient people paying like a premium to get access. I don't feel that should be the spirit.
Oh, wait. But what I meant by early access, by the way, is not this.
Okay.
Early access is a almost like an alpha version of the game that they release very early on.
That can also backfire, like with Cyberpunk, for example, when they released their earlier version. Game PCs crashed all over the world in harmony, so that can also backfire. So you should do this in like a bit of a good state. I think it's much better, as you said, I think, to release a very small game, show the concept towards people, get them excited, get also maybe some aspects of like let the community build on top of it, like we saw what's very successful. Of course, Minecraft, even Fortnite is doing this now. Other games are going very much into the modding experience. I think that's also something that we should encourage. And then let them build on top of it, maybe pick the best things, make it into the fuller version, maybe give something back towards the community that way. I think that can be indeed quite powerful and a model that can be super sustainable towards the future.
Yeah, I think in terms of like early access, it's how do you get to market first, and it's hard to tell right now in gaming, but certainly the way that Web3 works, quite often something is pretty obvious. There's a lot of research into an area. You might not need research for a game, might be something else, and maybe it's market research even, and then you realize that a product needs to be built. I think a really good example of this is like Lido, one of the most successful protocols in Web3. It was really obvious. Like we were researching it, many other teams were researching it, and then someone built it, and about 5 or 6 others built it as well, but they got that network effect at the very start, which blew it up. And I would argue the same thing will happen with Web3 games, that it won't be research into a technology, but it will be research into like how you leverage the infrastructure of Web3 that's completely different to Web2. And someone's going to figure it out. There's probably going to be, I think there's not enough research in Web3 gaming, if I'm honest. Like there's a lot of build and see if they come, but there's not much research into the infrastructure and how can you use a deterministic state machine in a way that you can't use in Web2. Like stuff like this, and someone will do it eventually. And eventually when that happens, that's the time to be first to market and ship. And you know it's already been validated, get it out. If you take a long time to ship, you're not even sure that the solution's correct, the problem might not even be there for users, / the game's not interesting, however you want to call it. Like, I think that won't be the winning strategy in Web3. And right now, for me, it feels like in gaming, you have Web2, Web 2.5, Web3, and they're all trying to work out this strategy. I would think eventually, over time, Web3 is the strategy, fully on-chain or different state machines rolling up, whatever it is. And at that point, it'll probably go back to Web3 thinking of like, something's going to work and everyone's going to realize it's going to work. And if you want to give yourself the best chance at success, go for that and build the best solution for that, user demand where they're engaged. So that's definitely a way that I could see all this playing out. And that's where you want to get in front of your audience, I would say.
Interesting.
And for us, we think that Web 2, when Web 2 came, then you have Web 3. Right now, what's interesting is we're at that Web 2.5 moving into Web 3 because as the ecosystem grows, we need that in order for the adoption of those who can use on-chain access and games. So that's why I think fundamentally, as founders building in Web 3, it is definitely quite complicated because consistently, if you build on a chain, that chain is changing. New chains are coming out, and you're trying to figure it all out. So that's why I think, as a team, the model of launch fast, fail fast, iterate is important. However, that is coupled with the fact that you have to have enough, funding for that, right? Treasury, and that's the part that absolutely is something that is very, sad when, the best team may have the best tech or the best product, but it's on the shelf because they just ran out of funding. So that's why, I just can't emphasize enough that at all times the core team needs to, have someone covering all areas, but fundamentally stay nimble and stay lean. And at times really know when to upsize and downsize because it's just crucial to the heart of what you're building. And I think that building in Web3 just, that's where, the last 10 years we've been investing in, from DeFi to when they did their first IEOs, ICOs, and then into Metaverse, DAOs, and then, infrastructure and, all the different, protocols and layers. So we've seen the changes, and now we just sit back and really think, we just need to find teams that can be persistent and weather through and stick with this industry, no matter if times are, hard or easy or, like thriving. And I think that's so important. And fundamentally, we try to say, we want to pick a team that can build, a great game or they're a great, gaming studio. It is hard because, their track record doesn't necessarily prove where they'll go. So that's why we look to just invest in, a team that's complementary and, bring in the right people. Because at the end of the day, a game, a company, a product is about the people. And I think, that's what is important, but staying focused to building something that you think users really will want. And, at the end of the day, it's something fun that is, consistently network effect and addictive. So I think the blockchain piece is super important, but we kind of overemphasize that in the last cycle. And that's why I think it's important to build something that fundamentally has the blockchain piece at the back end and not necessarily have to publicize that. And because it comes with its own baggage. People may not adopt this game or even stay away from using it. So in my view, launch something that you think people will want to just play and be actively playing that daily and telling others. And then everything else on the back end will roll out at its needed time, but have all of that, infrastructure planned and ready and, in the vision and, with the right teams, with the right funding at the right time.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone. This now concludes the investor panel.
Thank you.